Hey everybody, hope everybody's well. Brent here. Today we're going to do a review on, you guessed it, Yes The Quest. This is going to be the group's 21st studio album and it will be released October 1st. The group now consists of Steve Howe, Alan White, Jeff Downs, John Davison, and Billy Sherwood. Now, let's be totally honest with each other. Everybody's going to have reservations about this release. When Heaven and Earth landed, the fan base really didn't seem to take it to heart. It had disappeared without a trace since then. And since then, also, we have experienced the sad passing of Chris Squire, who has now been replaced by his designated successor of Billy Sherwood. More on Billy Sherwood later. All of the history, plus the possibility of one of the most polarized fan bases of any group alive, how does the Quest fare? There's a couple different points I need to make when talking about this album. The first thing is it's a different sounding Yes, and that it should be. The Quest sounds like a new work of a new lineup with a new approach. A lot of the album occupies a lighter, less intense, and more reflective space than you might be expecting. The Ice Bridge with the heavier sounding guitar work due on the outro is a great opener, but it is the most rock-oriented track on the album. This album contains much more acoustic guitars than one would expect. A lot of them are done by Howe, but also by singer John Davison. One of the highlights, talking of acoustic guitars, is a John Davison pencil called Future Memories, which I think is definitely one of the highlights of the album. It's definitely one of my favorites. You know, speaking of Steve Howe, it is clear that in his producer role, Howe hasn't sought so much as to make a facsimile of previous Yes albums, which is a good thing, but instead he has worked hard to produce an album that is strong as the song itself, which I think is great. I think if they had gone into it trying to replicate something in the past, they would have failed. And I think that's what happened with Heaven and Earth. The next point I kind of want to talk about on this album is the diversity. There's a lot of writing style and a lot of different approaches on this album, which gives it a very fresh new sound. I also have to mention that the real hero on this album to me is Billy Sherwood. You can really hear him trying to portray and make a sound similar to Chris Squire, but his own. And it really works. I mean, you can tell that he was obviously a big influence on his playing, as we all know he is. But I think he's a very comparable, and I think Chris Squire would be happy with the way he has handled his bass parts on this album. One other thing about the overall unity is John Davison's voice is strong, and it plays a very important of making this album stick. I do not want to make comparisons with John Anderson, because obviously everybody is going to. They're very, very similar in sound, which I guess is just part of this Yes sound, and John Davison pulls it off really, really well. One thing I also have to mention about this album, and this isn't just this album, a lot of people seem to be doing it right now, but they seem to feel of having disc one with, you know, the album, in this case, the first 8 tracks. And then, well, let's release another CD of, you know, 3 or 4 tracks that maybe didn't fit into the mold of the album. I'm really teeter-totter on that. Yes, it's kind of neat to get outtakes and stuff, but to me, just having an album that's about 45 minutes in length, like in the old days that would fit on both sides of a vinyl, was perfect. The 90s were really bad. You had to seem to fill 70 or 80 minutes music to get on one disc. There seemed to be a lot of filler on those albums. So maybe it's not a bad thing that they're releasing these albums with the bonus tracks, because sometimes there's some really good stuff on it, and this is no case. You can tell that these songs are definitely not throwaways, but don't really fit in the mold. So I'm on the table with that whole releasing one separate album and then a bonus disc. I can see its positives and I can see its weaknesses. So in conclusion, this is a very well-produced album of really decent songs And it really shows the strengths of everybody in the band. Now, as a debut for this lineup, I really hope this begins to show the band take their studio work more seriously towards the next one. Let's not wait another 8 years or 6 years or 4 years. Let's get something out in the next year or so. I think I haven't seen them live, but I understand they're not maybe the best live band anymore. That's just what I've heard, and that's maybe just a personal opinion. But if that's the case, well, take that lifetime and go into the studio and make some great, brand new, tremendous music that us fans want to hear. I would be all right with that, personally. So yeah, it's not a prog album of the past, and that's okay. I think there's a lot of things people will like about it. I know there's a lot of things people are going to nitpick, but overall, this is an honest effort and a league above heaven and earth. I'm going to give this album 3 stars out of 5. I think it deserves that. I think there's always room for improvement, but coming into it, I honestly didn't really know what to expect with the newest Yes album, but I was not disappointed, and I know it's going to have a lot of followers. So take care, my friends, as usual, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.